Hello, welcome to Into Deep, a podcast with me, Alyssa. This is a podcast where we can go a little too deep into topics surrounding feminism, anything from literature to pop culture, medical science and society. Honestly, my areas of expertise, I would say. Okay, maybe not, but areas that I find really interesting and that I tend to want to talk about a lot in my daily life. Every time I record this intro, I feel like I sound like Jeremy Renner introducing the Jeremy Renner app, which, like, you know what? I think I'm okay with that because I think I've been thinking for a while that I wanted to start some kind of medium where I could express the way that I think, because oftentimes I'll bring up topics to people and it's like the first time they've ever heard anything like what I'm saying. And yeah, so I want to talk about these things more and I want a place to be able to talk about them. I was like starting to write Substack essays for a while, but I feel like essay writing requires so much perfection and that just like wasn't doing it for me. And then I considered doing like video essays on YouTube. Once again, so much effort. Like, I just can't be bothered. And I also just kind of want to be able to talk without having to plan things and edit things down so perfectly. Anyway, back to Jeremy Renner. Okay, I feel like what was holding me back from starting anything like this is that it is kind of embarrassing. But like, I know men who make podcasts and all they talk about is just like literally like the most useless things ever that we've heard regurgitated for the last 500 years from men. Like, no one needs to hear that. Like, literally no one needs to hear that. And if Jeremy Renner had the confidence to start an app, like, I can start a podcast. Like, hello. I just feel like if men have the confidence to do all these things, then so can I. It's fine. Whatever. There are a few other reasons why I wanted to start this, though. First of all, that I just wanted to have a space where I could, like, talk about things. And I feel like that is because if you know me, you will agree that I literally just don't shut up. Like, I can talk forever about anything really. And it's honestly just because I love discussing a lot of these topics that I find super interesting. And they also tend to be topics that can make people uncomfortable or topics that we don't really think about every day. So I just want to have a space where I can talk about them more. In that same strain, I feel like I talk about these topics a lot, but I don't always look up the research or the evidence behind the way these things are the way they are. And so I feel like this will give me a reason to go deeper into topics that I think about a lot, but don't ever really look up the research backing it up or look up what other people are saying about it. And so that's what I want to do with this, just be able to talk about things from a lot of different perspectives, give you like a historical background as well to a lot of the things I talk about. What prompted me to start this like now is that I was having a conversation about gender with my mum, and I was just like talking for genuinely like 10 minutes straight about the social construction of gender. And I feel like what also went into that was, and this is very topical, like Mark Zuckerberg talking about how there's not enough masculine energy in businesses or workplaces. That, like, so shockingly bad for me. And I was just getting so annoyed about it that my mum was like, you know what, you should start a podcast. And I was like, no, I won't do that. Like, that's so embarrassing. And I brought it up to other people and they were like, no, like, you should start one. Like, you know, it's not actually embarrassing. The only time it's ever embarrassing is when men do it and then they just like, yeah, you know, classic male podcast host, which, yeah, I do agree is more embarrassing. So in this first episode, I did want to talk about, I wanted to talk about gender as a social construct. And I know that there is a lot of kind of nuances and conversations about talking about naming gender as a social construct, but we can get into that too as well. And also the concept of masculine and feminine energy. Like, oh my God, don't piss me off. Like, actually, nothing makes me more angry. I'll see creators who I agree with like 99% of the time, and then they'll start bringing up feminine energy. Girl, what are we talking about? Like, what do you mean? The whole concept of masculine and feminine is just the biggest lie that you've been sold. And if you're talking about gender roles and things, we're talking about, women being forced into a gender role, then we can't also be talking about being in my feminine energy era, like how to be more feminine energy. Like, that is literally so contradicting. We as women particularly can't be against traditional gender roles without also being against the concept of masculine and feminine. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I do find it kind of crazy nowadays when I bring up gender and I refer to it as a social construct, when people are kind of confused by that. I find it especially crazy, people that I know in real life being confused by that, because we were literally taught that in school. Like, I remember learning that gender was a social construct in like, girl, we were all in the year 11 English class together. Like, I don't know, like this is actually knowledge that you do get taught in school. So I bring it up to people and it's like, I'm saying how, gender doesn't actually have any biological basis necessarily. I mean, there's obviously kind of discussions and arguments about that as well. But the way that we have gender roles nowadays is not necessarily based on anything biological. Like, I mean, we're going to get into this, but things like nurturing behavior versus aggressive behavior, that really isn't based on anything at all. Yeah. Yeah, I bring that up to people and they're really shocked by that, which I do find crazy. But the term gender wasn't actually really a popular word or a word used at all until literally the 1950s, which, crazy, I know. There were earlier iterations of the term gender, and of course it came from originally languages that have, I guess, like gendered grammar. That seems to be where the term gender came from. But using gender in the way that we tend to use it now, which is, the social expectations that are put on a person based on their sexual difference, that term literally not used until the 1950s. And even in the 1950s, it was only referenced in like a few medical journals. It wasn't used in like regular society or a place where normal people who weren't in like scientific fields would see it until like the 1970s. Like, is that not insane to you? But although we didn't have a word for it up until then, there were still people referring to it without using that specific vocabulary. I have an example taken from Shulamith Firestone, who was a Canadian feminist, radical feminist author. Her book, The Dialectic of Sex, from 1970. She refers to one of the things that I talk about a lot, actually, which is the end goal of feminism. What I guess feminists want to be the end goal of a feminist revolution. So her quote is, "Just as the end goal of socialist revolution was not only the elimination of the economic class privilege, but of the economic class distinction itself, so the end goal of feminist revolution must be not just the elimination of male privilege, but of the sex distinction itself. Genital differences between human beings would no longer matter culturally." Like, this is what I've been saying. And the fact that we have this in writing from as early as 1970, I mean, it's crazy, but it also doesn't surprise me because people don't tend to listen to women, especially radical feminists, because radical feminism in the form that it exists in today has been around since clearly the 1970s. When we talk about feminism, the end goal would therefore be, as she said, uh, a kind of dissolution of the concept of gender. People would be able to act in any way they want, regardless of reproductive differences, which just sounds so like obvious to me. And the fact that to a lot of other people that isn't obvious is kind of crazy. But I do understand because the socialization runs really deep. So although we didn't have the language to be able to refer to gender, it was still referred to. And especially like shout out the radical feminists, like they were really ahead of their time, and still are, to be fair. Nowadays, we define gender, this is the World Health Organization definition, like gender refers to the characteristics of women, men, girls, and boys that are socially constructed. This includes norms, behaviors, and roles associated with being a woman, man, girl, or boy, as well as relationships with each other. As a social construct, gender varies from society to society and can change over time. When I'm talking about gender with people and they can't grasp the concept that gender isn't like actually based on your reproductive differences or whether you were assigned a female or male at birth, it's just so crazy to me because it's like that is literally the definition of gender. Like, I'm not making this up. This isn't like, I'm like, guys, like, you know, like gender is different actually. Like, I'm not changing the meaning of gender. That is literally just what it means. And so I do find it kind of insane when people don't want to agree with me on this because it's not really like something you can agree on. Like, that's literally just what the word means. Like, that's what the word was created for in the 1950s. It was in psychological like journals just to be able to refer to the differences between men and women socially, which are differences independent of reproductive systems or what other fucking like innate things we have between sexes, which there really isn't a lot of anyway. One of the main arguments that I get back when I bring up how the way women and men act isn't necessarily based on anything. I mean, the World Health Organization's like definition of gender does state that it varies from society to society and can change over time. I mean, if you look at social expectations of women in countries like Australia versus like genuinely any other country, it's going to be different anywhere. And it's been different now versus 100 years ago. The ability of gender to change kind of proves the point that it's not something that's innate in people. It is a socialized difference. There was an article published in 2023 titled The Myth of Man the Hunter. Now, the main argument that I get when I bring up gender being socially constructed is the fucking hunter-gatherer argument. Oh my God, it drives me insane. And when I was talking to my mom about this the other day, she also brought that up. And there's nothing wrong with people bringing it up. Like, no one is, you know, immune to propaganda, but unfortunately that's all that is. There really isn't that much research to show anything about men hunting and women gathering. So I'm going to read you a quote from that article that I referenced. It's talking about how, like, having that viewpoint that women were gatherers and were nurturing as a result versus men were hunters, so they're aggressive as a result, just innately. So the quote goes, "This viewpoint further purports that females engage in the majority of child-rearing activities, which is aligned with the slow-moving pace of gathering. Such assumed sex-specific gender roles and subsistence activities are commonly construed with additional gender traits, such as human men being less emotional and more aggressive, while human women tend to demonstrate more nurturing behavior and a focused interest in children. While we have known these patterns are culturally defined and thus variable for over a century now, it is only recently that the data are building to move a more accurate paradigm of subsistence flexibility into discourse." Girl, like literally. The fact that we base our ideas of women and men on a myth of hunter-gathering from like thousands and thousands of years ago is Honestly, no, it doesn't shock me actually at all, but it is still crazy because women are expected to be child rearing because they were required to take a more slow moving role, which was gathering. How are women expected to hunt when they have to take care of their baby? Like, that doesn't make any sense. That's why women didn't hunt. They're gonna take care of their baby. The man doesn't take care of the baby because he is aggressive caveman and he hunts. Guys, like, seriously, it's not that difficult to understand. Like, I don't know, even having that viewpoint at all is kind of caveman-like. And I mean, I'm always against using any references to uh, societies older than ours to explain why we should act the way that we do today. Girl, people were getting transfused with milk in the 1900s in order to cure them from diseases. And that was only like 100 years ago. Are we seriously going to listen to societies which came before us for any information on science or gender roles or psychology? Like, these people didn't even know bacteria existed. Like, it's just insane to me to be using that as evidence for how we should be acting today. Human societies are never set in stone. Like, they can always change. We can always change the way that we act. It's never based on anything. It's always changeable. But men just love to use that argument that it's like, you know, this is the way it's always been. Like, we can't change it. Why not? Like, literally, why not? That's not a reason to not change things. If anything, if it's been happening like this for so long and people are still not happy, I think that might be a sign that we should probably change things. Getting into something a little more topical, we are going to be talking about, trigger warning, guys, we're going to be talking about Mark Zuckerberg. I know he's really scary and disgusting, but unfortunately, we have to talk about him. I'm sure you would have seen recently him talking on the fucking Joe Rogan podcast about bringing back masculinity in the workplace. Guys, let's bring back masculinity in 2025. And you know what's funny? I was looking this up because I wanted to see what other people were saying about it as well. Obviously, my opinion on it was already extremely negative and I already hate him. But as I was looking up the best article I could find on it, it was published on the 15th of January by Men's Health. Like, that's really funny to me because, like, it does show the extremist level of how like unacceptable it is for someone to be saying that in a workplace. If you were saying that in literally any other workplace, like, you're going to HR. It's just that he's the CEO of Meta that he's able to say these things and have no repercussions. So anyway, I'm going to read to you what he said. To quote Mark Zuckerberg, he said, "I think a lot of the corporate world is pretty culturally neutered. Masculine energy is good, and obviously society has plenty of that, but I think corporate culture was really trying to get away from it." Look, I think that's for good reason. He also followed on to say that I think having a culture that celebrates the aggression a bit more has its own merits that are really positive. Aggression in a workplace? Like, that has no place in any workplace, to have any kind of aggression in any workplace. That is crazy. And the author of this article as well also said equating masculinity with aggression is gender essentialism 101. And that is absolutely true. I mean, I've already been talking about gender as a social construct, but as a result of that, the terms masculinity and femininity are not real. They're made up. And I know that you can argue that everything in society is made up, but masculinity and femininity especially, like the concept of being a woman or a man and the concept of having specific ways that you have to act when you're by chance born as either a female or a male. It has no merit. It has no evidence. It is entirely based on socialization. And therefore, the concept of masculinity is a lie. It's not a real thing. And so saying that masculinity needs to return to the workplace literally just doesn't even make any sense. But anyway, I digress. I feel like masculinity as well is a big problem for men, and not to be like too empathetic to men, but I do actually really pity men who are brought up in an environment that really, really values masculinity. And I mean, I would argue that that is any environment that you can be brought up in the world. But there's obviously specific men who are more inclined to be affected by it than others. It is sad when men see themselves first as a man and then a human being, and their expression or their performance of masculinity and being a man equates to their value as a person. And that does lead to such a big degree of like insecurity and obviously never feeling like you're enough. Which, I mean, as women, I know we can all, I mean, we've already all experienced that, but I guess men do experience it too. It's not really an excuse to do all of the evil things that they do, but I'll accept it. To continue on, Zuckerberg also said that it's one thing to say we want to be welcoming and make a good environment for everyone, and I think it's another to basically say that masculinity is bad. Look, saying masculinity is bad, first of all, no one has literally ever said that. And masculinity is literally what runs the world right now. As much in it as it is a made-up concept and it's not like a real thing, it is still something that is in every corporation and every company and every stupid CEO like Mark Zuckerberg and fucking Elon Musk. That is what they run everything on. Even these men who are in such positions of power and, you know, are completely untouchable, you can tell, like, you can literally tell that they're all still insecure because they, again, feel like their performance of masculinity is the most important thing to their value as a human. When you look at, okay, not to be like too mean, but you know what, actually, I should be meaner. When you look at people like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, they are not really the epitome of masculinity. And I feel like when you look at them visually and even the way that they talk and stuff, it's so obvious that they would be insecure in their masculinity because of just the way that they are as people. And they bring out that insecurity on everyone else. And like, it's the worst thing ever when it's these people in such big like positions of power where it's like you're never going to be impacted by anything, yet you still are so hellbent on keeping up your expectations of gender and masculinity. Also in that quote, Zuckerberg was saying that he still wants the environment to be welcoming and good, but I'm sure a lot of you have seen recently that Meta would be removing like protocols that restricted how people could discuss topics. And I am quoting this from that Men's Health article again, but it is allowing people to talk about people with different gender identities, trans people, gay people as mentally ill. And it also allows people to talk about women as household objects. So, sorry, what were we saying about a welcoming and a good environment? You want masculinity back, but you also want to be able to talk about women as household objects. And we're bringing back being gay as a mental illness. Like, don't even talk to me right now. That is so insane. It's also not lost on me that, you know, we never achieved, and I hate to be saying this in past tense, but look, when you're seeing people in such positions of power like this going so backwards, I feel like for a while we were really moving forwards with like equality and, you know, working towards something which is kind of maybe acceptable. And yeah, it's not lost on me that we never achieved equality in workplaces. I mean, the gender pay gap, obviously still a thing that exists. Even people getting hired based on their gender identity, like that still is a thing that exists. And there's a reason why we have protocols in place which aim to hire people who are women or who are not white or any other minority, because if we don't have those in place, white men would just be working any important job ever. It's like, it's impossible. And then when you have any sort of progress, we have people like Mark Zuckerberg saying, what the hell happened to the masculine energy? It's not really a mystery why this is coming back now as well. I think social progress was getting towards a point where it was making men too uncomfortable. And they're coming back, even harder with things like masculine energy and, embracing masculinity again and aggression. When a person like Donald Trump gets elected into literally the highest position of power in the world, like, I don't even know how we come back from that, guys. It's kind of over. No, don't worry. We have hope always. I'd also relate this to people talking about feminine energy as well. And I think that is almost just as damaging as bringing up masculine energy. Because if you want women to be equal, women cannot be equal in a world where gender exists. When there is a divide between men and women socially and culturally in the way that we're expected to act, in the way that we have a role in society that we have to play in order to be accepted, there is always going to be a divide between men and women when that is the case. And so, thinking about things in a way of like, girl boss, like, I'm in my feminine energy era, that's not helping at all. It's actually, if anything, it's making it worse. You need to like separate yourself from the idea of gender expectations, femininity and masculinity. That would really be the only way we can progress forward. I mean, I know that it's really dark times right now. I had like the biggest crash out ever when Trump was elected. Like, I just couldn't even believe it. The fact that he was elected isn't really the main problem. It's what that means for society and the way that we're thinking and the way that we're going so far backwards. You would think even in, 8 years since he was elected last time, there would have been some kind of progress to make it so that rapists can't be president-elects of the United States. But, things don't always go that way. Moving back again to the concept of the only way to free yourself from gender roles is to rid yourself of gender roles altogether. I recently read Last Days of Hot Slit, which was kind of a collection of radical feminist writing by Andrea Dworkin. There was one part in that which I think was so important, also topical as well, but she was talking about when she was growing up in Jewish school as a child, and she was getting taught even back then about Israel. And to her, it always felt like Israel was a negative thing because of the concept of separation. And she was kind of equating this to gender as well. When you have a nation which is built on being only one type of people, I mean, particularly in an area which wasn't theirs to take to begin with, but when she was at school, she didn't even know about the fact that there were people there before. She wasn't being taught that at a school which was very obviously pro-Israeli. She was mentioning how when you have a nation that is built on, separation, it can never be something positive. And I think that is the same thing with gender. When you have a social construction that is built on separating people based on their reproductive differences, but then giving them specific ways which they are forced to act, that system can never be reclaimed or put into any kind of way that is positive. The only way for women to truly push forward and to have any kind of feminist revolution would be to dismantle the concept of gender entirely. That's really the only way that we can possibly get out of this. And I know that's a big ask, and it's not really something that I ever see happening in my lifetime. And after my lifetime, I fear everyone on the planet will be dead. So look, it's something to hope, but the likelihood of it happening is obviously very low. Uh, I mean, even when we talk about environmentalism and climate change, what has really caused climate change? I know you can blame capitalism, but the right and capitalism and any of the men in power today are in their masculine energy era, guys. The way that men are allowed to act and have power. I'm going to quote Andrea Dworkin again, and this is from one of her texts titled, I want a 24-hour truce during which there is no rape. The power exercised by men day to day in life is power that is institutionalized. It is protected by law, it is protected by religion and religious practice. It is protected by universities, which are strongholds of male supremacy. It is protected by a police force. It is protected by those whom Shelley called the unacknowledged legislators of the world, the poets, the artists. Against that power, we have silence. And Andrea Dworkin she actually gave this as a speech in 1983. 1983, literally 40 years ago, over 40 years ago, and it's still something that we have to fight against now. It's something that I bring up now and people are still shocked, or, it's like a crazy thing for me to bring up to them when it's like we have known this for years, and it just keeps going round and round again. But I do really recommend that you read any writing by Andrea Dworkin because she puts things a lot better than I could ever put them. But I guess the takeaway from that is that, these men in positions of power who are insecure use their masculinity or the concept of masculinity and being a man to have power over not just women, but also people who are of lower social status. I mean, of course, capitalism comes into this as well, but, that's a long conversation that maybe I can get into at a different time. But they use that power, they exert that power over us to have more power. And as Andrea Dworkin said, it is something that's institutionalized. Like, it's protected by every system. So Zuckerberg coming forward and saying that he thinks there should be more masculinity in these workplaces and the corporate world, like, shut the hell up. Like, seriously, we need like the most minuscule amount of masculinity ever. We need less masculinity everywhere, please. Like, we need less femininity as well. The concepts of both it's just such a big lie, and it's so imprinted in everything. I mean, even language, when we talk about the concept, I mean, people love to complain about the grammatical correctness of using they, them for people who are non-binary. Like, we're having the wrong argument here. In language, we shouldn't even have a she or he because there should be no cultural or social differences between men and women. The only differences that we really actually have are reproductive, possibly physical strength as well. But if we're not including those, then I don't think that there is anything actually setting us apart. I mean, of course, there is certain conversations about that as well. How do people know when they grow up that they're a different gender to what they were assigned at birth? I don't know. Like, that is a good conversation to have as well. But social expectations of gender can be so damaging, especially for women. People always love making the arguments of like, but when boys and girls are growing up, like, girls like playing with dolls and boys like playing with cars and things. Kids growing up know about gender from almost the moment they're born. It's so deeply ingrained into everything. It's not possible to escape. And I know, like, parents can be like, but I never brought up my son in that way. Like, I never wanted him to play with like toy weapons or things like that. But it still happened. It's like, well, if you're sending your child to school, or if he's seeing any kind of TV or any kind of media, then he will see that that's what's for him. It's expected for him to grow up into a man who expresses like supposedly masculine traits. That's not really something you can escape in our society. Even like equating colors like blue and pink to boys and girls, like that also carries the baggage of being like blue is for cars and pink is for Barbies. That it starts from literally birth, and it's not something that you can really bring up a child to not acknowledge, or you can't bring them up to be separate from this. And I mean, it sucks, but that's how it is. It is just another reason why I think that argument of saying, you know, that's just how children grow up. Girls just tend to like playing with dolls and boys don't. It's not really a credible argument, because children are always going to grow up with gender expectations. And so saying that, you know, that's the reason that you believe that gender is something that is innate doesn't really make any sense, because no one is free from that socialization. I do genuinely believe that the endpoint of feminism, of course, would be the dissolution of genders, as I've mentioned. How we reach that and like how that would even look in society, I have no idea. But you know what? A girl can dream. We always have hope that things can maybe get better for gender in society. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to this episode, listening to me talk about gender. I hope that you were able to learn something new, or maybe I brought up something that you'd never thought about before, or maybe I just gave you some new language to be able to argue with men. You know, any positive impact is a good impact. Some takeaways from this: just remember that gender isn't real. And you also don't have to conform to being what you're expected to be as a woman. Gender in society is always changeable. It's never set in stone. Nothing is ever set in stone in society. But thank you so much for listening to my first episode. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, let me know. And if you have any suggestions of things that you'd want me to talk about, please let me know, because I had so much fun recording this. Have an amazing, beautiful, lovely day, and never let a man bring you down. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, goodbye.